what is the objective here, though, towards in this for the Americans attacking Iran? Because they won't commit ground troops, and again, that would be a disaster of its own. But they talk about regime change, but there's no replacement government. Some talk about destroying the nuclear program, but that's allegedly been obliterated. Um, I just don't see a story here. How even best case, if they get their objectives, what exactly is achieved? They can deliver, as you said, a lot of death and destruction to Iran. Of course, Iran can deal a heavy blow against the United States and its allies as well. But I don't see at the end of this security being enhanced for the United States. They're not going to walk away from this stronger. So, what is the objective here in terms of what to expect when the strikes comes in? Because it seems predictable. They're going to go after political leadership, military leadership. But how will this success be defined? Because I'm watching, our different our own journalists reporting on Iran, which means that they're sitting in Syria where they're celebrating the former success, and it's telling us what they're hearing from Iran. I mean, it's a bit, it's parody, but but it's but I was wondering how you see this, the objectives.
Yes, and of course, Trump also said that he was the one who brought Jolani or Ashara to power. I mean, everything now is everyone has been exposed. And regional allies of the United States, Turkey and Jordan and Qatar and others, they've all been exposed to those who want to open eyes. So those who don't want to open their eyes, they will remain closed until the end of their days. But everything is clear who stands with who and who is actually supporting the Palestinian people, who is actually opposing genocide, who's actually actively opposing genocide. It's those entities that are being punished by the collective West and those entities that are always antagonized by Western allies in the region, whether it's Qatar through their immense gas money or others through their immense oil money, or through Erdogan, who gets gas money from Qatar to carry out his both propaganda operations and his military operations and his support for ISIS and Al Qaeda and other such terror groups. I think you touched upon a key point, and that is that the United States has not brought in ground troops. And if it wants to carry out a war with Iran, it will have to bring in maybe 1.5 million soldiers, which would, I think, on its own wreck the U.S. economy. It's probably not even doable. But without that, the United States loses the war because the Iranians are on the ground and Iran's allies are on the ground in Iraq, in Yemen, and elsewhere. And of course, in these dictatorships in the region, uh, as I said, there are millions of people who are slaves, effectively, or indentured servants, and workers who have very few, if any, rights. And if there's chaos, if these countries, uh, their economies go downhill very fast, I can envisage a situation where the ruling families will be overthrown. In fact, I don't think they'll stand. I don't think they'll stay. They're probably already leaving. Many of the people around them, or their families, or some of the princes, they're probably already in their palaces in Europe and North America, waiting to see what happens. So, without a huge ground presence, how's the United States going to even defeat Iran? They can kill Iranians. They can't bring about regime change. Whoever they murder can be replaced. We have a constitution. Everything is clear as day. The country will be managed until the war comes to an end, and people will defiantly resist. And but after it starts, the United States can't stop it without losing face. So when the price of oil and gas go through the roof, when the United States starts giving casualties, when its loyal proxies in the region begin to wobble and collapse, uh, how is Trump going to retreat, or how is he going to uh, shift away or move away from conflict and present himself as a victor? He won't be able to do so, and it's at a time, all this, when the situation is terribly bad for the United States anyway. We saw what happened with the Supreme Court yesterday. We've seen the conflict inside the United States over ICE and the murders carried out by ICE. We've seen how the gap between rich and poor in the United States is growing, how the Epstein class, most importantly, has been exposed, but has also been shown to be above the law, and it will remain above the law as things stand. All of this is going to cause the Trump to be in a very, very um, difficult situation. In fact, I would say it would be more than difficult, an impossible position. So this is not like 2003, where Western media back then could mobilize support for a war and the U.S. government could get away with it. The American people are not as gullible as they were back then. They've seen the genocide in Gaza. They've seen the Epstein, well, a little bit of the Epstein files. But and when the economy collapses, uh, I, I, I think that Trump will be in an impossible position. And as I said, it's the resistance that has troops on the ground, not the United States. Yemen today is much stronger than it was a year ago. Even when the United States carried out its 7-week war against Yemen and failed, that Yemen is different from this Yemen. In Iraq, the resistance is preparing itself. We've already seen them reveal underground bases full of drones and other capabilities. So it's not as if the United States is the only side that is preparing for war. The other side is preparing, but they also have ground forces in large numbers, and they have the ability to destroy everything in the Persian Gulf and on the other side of the Persian Gulf and in the Caucasus. And there's nothing that the United States can do about that. Not absolutely nothing. If anyone looks at the map, they'll see that the Persian Gulf is not very wide. Iran does not need its long-range missiles that it used against the Israeli regime and force it to beg for a ceasefire. It has hundreds of thousands of drones that could strike anything in the Persian Gulf. Oil rigs, uh, ports, petrochemical facilities, refineries, tankers, of course, and other cargo ships, uh, gas wells, oil wells, everything can be destroyed. And it would take many years to restore them. The longer the war lasts, if after 3 days, it'll be far worse than 2 days because it'll be more irreversible. After 4 or 5, 6 days, it'll just get worse and worse. And even when the war comes to an end, it will take a lot more time to restore these capabilities. And no doubt the Iranians will be demanding compensation from these regimes anyway for hosting those U.S. bases. So I don't see how the United States could win. It's not possible. They can slaughter people, and they will. We saw how the Israelis bombed apartment blocks, and Western media pretended that these were precision strikes because they have no sense of morality. They have no sense of humanity. They are tools of the Epstein class. So Trump will bomb and slaughter. We saw last night the Israelis murder a large number of Lebanese children and an entire family as they were breaking their fast. No one in the West cares. In Gaza, they're slaughtering every day. No one cares. I mean, in the ruling class, in the media, the Epstein class, and those who work for them across the Western world. So they won't care when Trump bombs civilian infrastructure and murders ordinary Iranians. But that won't bring the United States victory. It will. This will all lead to defeat, and it will just be a matter of time when Trump will be forced to declare some fake victory and retreat. But everyone will know that the failure is his. I'm not for certain that I'm not sure that there will be war, and I'm not for war. But this is what I believe will happen. There will be destruction, a lot of destruction in Iran, because the United States and Israeli regime and Western regimes in general are all ruthless and inhumane. And we've seen that from the Epstein documents, what the nature of this crowd. But I think that the damage that will be done to the global economy will be far greater. When factories shut down, when businesses shut down, the building may still be there, but it'll be an empty building. And so then you will see, I think, people across the world on the move. Places in Latin America, if they're upset about immigration, the movement of people will be far greater than ever before in Africa and Asia. Even though Europe and North America will be in crisis mode themselves, but those are the traditional destinations. So there are so many bad things that can happen to the world, but Iran is going to defend itself. It's not Iran that has brought about this situation. It's not Iran that's engaging in genocide in Gaza. It's not Iran that is pushing for war. In fact, the reason why Iran is negotiating is partially to see if the United States is sane enough to have an acceptable deal. But even more importantly, what Iran is doing is it's telling the world that it's not us, it's them. So when the global economy goes down, everyone knows who to blame.
I guess the source of my pessimism, though, is with all this military hardware moving in and all this chest beating, it's impossible almost then to yeah to step down to again, as I began saying, finding this off ramp. Of course, as Trump suggests, all of this is to push Iran into a deal, but as you said, Iran is negotiating, but the whole question is, well, what kind of deal can actually be made here? At this point, some critics would say that the negotiations they appear to be a fraud. That is, they're so far apart, and they even what's on the table to be negotiated is not even agreed yet. Do you see the same problem with the negotiations? Are they too far apart, or do you think a deal could be made if Trump wants a victory to pull this whole thing back? I mean,
Well,
not
Iran is not going.
JCPOA, for example.
Well, the thing is that the United States is not so far from its public comments. It's not talking about a JCPOA. It's talking about Iran's regional allies. That's off the table. Iran won't discuss them. It's talking about Iran's military capabilities. That's off the table. Iran won't discuss them. It's talking about, in public at least, Iran giving up its nuclear program and its right to enrichment. All of that is off the table. But and a sign of Iran's uh, strength and its position was what we saw during that show in Turkey when the United States was calling for the negotiations to be held there, and Turkey, of course, being a NATO entity. And then we saw from Al Jazeera a Turkish, Egyptian, Qatari proposal, which was quite disgusting, where Iran would stop supporting its regional allies, including Hamas, which shows that none of these three entities are supportive of the Palestinian resistance. In reality, they're just, they're in the U.S. camp and reducing its military defense capabilities and so on, and its nuclear program. But Iran said no, and Iran said it will only negotiate with Americans, not in some group with, at some table with multiple countries, and that it will only negotiate in Oman. And ultimately, the Americans were forced to accept that. And the indirect talks that were held in Oman and then in Europe, but still with Omani mediation, showed that Iran, how firm Iran is in its position. But then again, we also have to remember that this is highly symbolic for Iran too. Iran is trying to remind everyone by restarting the indirect talks in Oman that this already happened once. And before the 12-day war, Iran and the United States had indirect talks. After the first round, as you recall, the United States accepted Iran's right to enrichment. Wickoff went on Fox News and admitted as such. And then in round two, they moved the goalposts, and 3, 4, the U.S. kept moving the goalposts at the insistence of the Zionist lobby, obviously. And ultimately, the United States, it turned out it was conspiring with the Israeli regime all along and it was being deceitful, and it carried out an attack. So the negotiations now that are taking place are of the same nature. The Iranians are not going to be fooled by the Americans, and they're telling the world that basically that we did this before, and we all recall what happened back then. Uh, I can't say what will happen. Iran, though, is preparing for war, and every day it is preparing further. Iran's capabilities today are significantly greater than they were during the 12-day war. The 12-day war was very helpful for Iran to discover its weaknesses and to improve its strengths. And since then, Iran has been working very hard on high-tech capabilities, air defenses, drone defenses, and of course, improving its offensive capabilities. But again, I would like to stress that the difference between the 12-day war and this war are on two fronts. One is that this will be a regional war. This will be a game changer. The second is that overwhelmingly, Iran's capabilities are directed towards the United States, not towards Israel. The long-range missiles that are directed towards occupied Palestine and the Mediterranean are necessary for entities that are far away. But Iran has far larger numbers of middle-range and short-range missiles and drones that can strike anything across the Persian Gulf region and the Indian Ocean. And those missiles are far larger in number and much more easy to move around. You don't need these big launchers. The same is true with the drones. And those underground bases that are spread out across the southern and central parts of Iran, they've been created, or they've been building them since the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, and when Iran was declared the axis of evil, and Bush and then Obama started saying all options are on the table. So Iran's firepower that's directed towards the United States and its proxies and its assets in the region are far greater than what it used against the Israeli regime. And of course, Iran can still use those long-range missiles, which are now much larger in number, more precise, and with bigger payloads.